Preventable. One of the leading ways that we can end it is through something called the Columbia Protocol. Kelly Posner Gerstenhaber, founder and director of the Columbia Lighthouse Project, developed the protocol, joins us now. It is great to see you. We are friends. I love you, and I love this work. I'm joined by two people I respect and admire. That is a gift. What is it? What does it do? Why does it work?
Well, I just want to step back for a second and start with the good news, as you're saying, that there is hope, there is help, suicide is preventable, and suffering, people don't have to suffer in silence. So one of the things that we've known, why we haven't been able to touch the needle very much is that 50% of suicides see their primary care doctor the month before they die. We should be asking questions the way we monitor for blood pressure. We know that many adolescents who've tried to take their own lives that show up to the emergency department are not there for psychiatric reasons. So we know if we're not asking, like we do vision testing or blood pressure, we won't find the people suffering in silence. But we've learned that even that's not enough. So the Department of Defense and the Undersecretary's office, they had this, and the VA had this urgent recognition, Dr. Franklin, that we must go beyond the doctor's office. We must find people where they live, work, and thrive, because many people won't have the will to come to you. So when we start to ask everybody, put it in their hands. Many people won't ever get to the doctor's office. So coach, peer, spouse, janitor even. So what's happened, so the Columbia Protocol is a simple set of questions that help us for the first time identify who's actually at risk, who to worry about, what the questions are to ask, what to do with the answers, but also breaking down those barriers of stigma that people want to be asked and they need to be asked. When people are suffering, they actually want help. And there's this myth that if you ask somebody, it's going to cause them to be suicidal, when it's actually the opposite. They feel relief and they feel grateful when you ask, and it's quite an empowering feeling. And the other thing is, forget about that it's the right questions. When you're asking and when we have a language, it builds connectedness. The CDC has told us that feelings of isolation and loneliness are one of our greatest risk factors. Do you know that loneliness is equal to having 15 cigarettes a day? It can be more lethal than smoking and hypertension. I mean, it's amazing. And when you actually connect, that caring and that asking can be medicine.
I think that's such an important point. And anybody, as you're saying, it's not just the doctors, but anybody can potentially have a role here. Is this a screening test in your mind, or have I already identified something in somebody and now I'm concerned? Because the issue is that a lot of people may not have symptoms, right?
Exactly. So we must ask like blood pressure. We must ask everywhere. And when you're at the doctor's office, it's not who are you worrying about. You're asking everybody. But the parent and everybody else, they just have a tool, or the guy that works at the gun counter, because that guy who goes up to the gun counter to buy that gun to kill himself does not want to die and does not know there's help. So something as simple as having a public health approach and finding people, we've seen dramatically how well that works. So the Air Force, for example, they were the first ones. Every airman, every spouse, dentist, they were the only service this year to reduce suicide. The Marines were the first ones to test that. Every legal assistant, clergy, they reduced suicide 22% that year. So we're rolling this out. We talked about people taking their own lives in the parking lots of VAs. So we're going to give it to the parking lot attendants, hopefully. I just did a training with all the lawyers and the community
works well enough
workers.
that the recognition from the government that you got for the work was the highest. You are the only person I've ever had who hides the highest civilian honor that they can get behind your hair. Will you show them the award, and what did it mean to you to get to it, about the promise of the protocol?
I was awarded the Secretary of Defense Medal for Exceptional Public Service because the work with the military, really showing it was so empowering to show that we can combat this, shared humanitarian crisis that we have in suicide. So, and they were the first ones to really show and partner that we must put it in everybody's hands, and by breaking down these barriers of not identifying the people who suffer. But I just want to say, so we know we need to identify and find people who need help. But the other thing is, the biggest cause of suicide is this treatable medical illness called depression, but we don't think of depression like we think of cancer. You would never hear the word choice when it comes to cancer. So that means that because of that stigma and misunderstanding, 50 to 75% of people who need treatment don't get it. And let me just say how many people are touched. You know, it's the #1 cause of global disability. #1, costs humanity more than anything, but incredibly treatable once we break down that barrier.
Is there enough resources available, though? Because we talk about the fact, like, if I identify somebody and now I say, well, I want to get them into a hospital or get them care, because of the stigma imparted at an institutional level, there may not be enough doctors, enough beds, enough resources overall.
Yes, well, I think that's one of the benefits of having the right questions to identify who's at risk. So only 1% of people on the Columbia actually need a next step. So you're able to maximize, you know, and optimize your resources in very powerful ways. And when we think about the simplicity of some treatments, antidepressants that anybody can prescribe, right? So we, of course, have to address the...
And what we'll do is, in social media tonight, we're going to put out how people can go to the site, see what it is, understand how, if they're a manager, they're responsible for anything, they can bring this in, bring this information in, and spread the awareness. My friend, thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Chris.
Deserve the award.
Grateful to be here.
All right.
Thank you.
We asked you, what do you think? Let's talk. What do you buy? What do you not buy? What are you worried about? What do you want to know? We'll go through some of the biggest, most popular comments next. Well.